If you feel like fatherhood is trying to fly a plane with one wing clipped, as if the entire world around you is working against you, you're not imagining it. For thousands of years, men had built-in support systems with shared values, common interests, and reliable mentorship. But in just a few generations, all of that was dismantled. Truth was disconnected from authority. Leadership was painted as oppressive, and men were left to figure it out on their own. But here's the thing, just as society tore those things down, just as it deconstructed them, so can we reconstruct them. I've spent years breaking this down through the lens of psychology and sociology, leadership, and fatherhood. If we want to rebuild our families, we can only do so by reclaiming truth, authority, and community. So in this video, we're going to map out exactly how we got here, why fatherhood seems so isolated and broken, what happens when truth and authority are separated, and most importantly, what we have to do to fix it. Let's get into it. The next question is, what is the first step toward rebuilding that? What are the necessary conditions to reestablishing, first for ourselves, that network, that common framework, that alignment, and then once we've built it for ourselves, how do we build it for our families and our extended families and our communities? So that's what we're going to get into next. When people were uprooted as nuclear families in the Industrial Revolution and transplanted into urban and industrial centers, what that meant was they had to abandon their sense of truth, because their long-standing and enduring community beliefs and values, what kept them rooted and provided them with purpose and meaning and established their priorities. Once they were transplanted, that was just idiosyncratic to them. And they had a choice between either stubbornly holding on to those and having a lot of friction with their neighbors and co-workers in that melting pot environment, or in order to get along more easily, the fastest path to coexistence is to abandon belief, abandon values, abandon those sort of philosophical and metaphysical principles that they and their ancestors going back 10,000 years would have taken for granted, would have provided them with overarching purpose. But in order to survive in the concrete jungle, in order to integrate and get through day to day, the easiest path was abandoning truth. And so authority is merely arbitrary. And so that began in the Industrial Revolution and then ramped up through the information age, because as we atomized families and husbands and wives have less and less time together, parents have less time with children, children become more and more wards of the state who are brought up and indoctrinated and educated by bureaucratic institutions. Their value system, their belief system, such as it is, mostly denies the existence of truth. That is how they resolve the conflict between competing truth claims, is to deny them all equally. And in that world, in the world that we created in the industrial and information age, the exercise of authority is correctly criticized as being arbitrary, because it's not rooted in or in service to any higher truth. So there were reactions, again, with the benefit of retrospect, there's predictable reactions to this disconnect between truth and authority. One is the individualistic, the individuality-focused reaction, where somewhere on the spectrum of libertarianism and transcendentalism, the individual says, I recognize your authority as arbitrary. I am suspicious of this entire system. I don't want you to impose any burdens or constraints or requirements or duties on me because I reject or am suspicious of it all. I want to be left alone. I want to be a libertarian. And if I don't have my own source of truth that I'm holding on to, then I just become a hedonistic nihilist, right? That's the most extreme form, libertarianism being far more common. The other reaction that is a fallout of the Industrial Revolution is a identity group focused mindset, where if you identify with some group of people, be that an economic class or an ethnic or national class, and you say, wait, all of this exercise of authority is just arbitrary. If anybody can exercise authority for any reason to anybody's benefit or detriment, then I want my group to exercise authority. I want to seize the levers of power for the benefit of my group and to keep other groups down. And so if you think in economic terms, that makes you a Marxist. And if you think in national identity terms, that makes you a fascist. So those are both reactions to the unintended fallout of the Industrial Revolution, where we disconnected the exercise of authority from the concept of truth, of a higher authority, of a greater purpose. Now, people who have bad tastes in their mouth with regard to Marxism and fascism and libertarianism, but they are unwilling to acknowledge or embrace any source of truth that they can connect to authority, they fall down to one of the most common mindsets, worldviews in our society today, which is postmodern relativism. I reject truth, I am suspicious of all authority, and I have mixed feelings about either individual autonomy or group identity. I go back and forth between those things, and I basically just want to get through the day, right? I just want everybody to get along. I just want to make things as frictionless as possible. And I think that the best way to do that is through postmodern relativism. We can now see how we got to where we are today, why our society is predominantly postmodern and relativistic. Now, how does this help us figure out what our first step is? Well, the first step, if we want to cultivate flourishing for ourselves, our families, and the next generation, is we need to recognize that the last 75 years have proven what a world in which we abandon any sense of truth, in which we reject the concept of authority, leads to despair and dysfunction. If we want to have flourishing, we need to reclaim, rediscover, and cultivate a healthy relationship with the truth and with authority, with community and with individualism. We need to have those three things in a healthy proportion. That is why in the Fit for Fatherhood community, another filtering element is the Fit for Fatherhood creed, identifying what fundamental beliefs and values would a man have to affirm in order to be, for his worldview, his mindset to be compatible with human flourishing, with cultivating the kinds of relationships and dynamics between himself and his family and the community, in order to lead to better outcomes for himself, his children, and generations to come. So the Fit for Fatherhood creed was carefully crafted to be as precise as possible in order to identify and encapsulate the necessary elements of a person's worldview. Now, there are many different philosophies, religious traditions that a man could be coming from that could be compatible with this creed. So this is not prescriptive in those senses, but it does definitely exclude certain worldviews and ideologies like Marxism, fascism, like extreme forms of libertarian nihilism and hedonism. If those are worldviews that a man subscribes to, then he will not be eligible for Fit for Fatherhood. Because in order for this community to be effective, an authentic community, it has to be one where the men in it have shared beliefs and values. That is an indispensable element of what communities were for 10,000 years, until 175 years ago. Peer relationships, mentor-mentee relationships, community standards and expectations for behavior were shaped by a common set of beliefs and values that serve as a foundation, underpin everything we're doing, so that we know in our community most of life is an experience of isolation and lack of rootedness, lack of support, which is in large part how we find ourselves in the despairing social situation that we are today. Recognizing how that pendulum swung, we can now see how it will begin to swing back if we are ready to seize that opportunity. The secret to being ready for you and I today, as fathers, as husbands, thinking about what we can do for ourselves, for our current family units, and to prepare them and the next generation to seize this opportunity, we have to rebuild it. And in order to do that, you and I need to overcome our individual limitations and once again figure out a strategy, a framework for approaching being a father, a husband, a head of a household. Approach that mission once again by tapping into a network of similarly situated men, a network of mutual support and mentorship and coaching and accountability. Because through that network, we can accelerate and improve the quality of our OODA loop, of our ability to observe and orient, to make decisions and follow through on them. Particularly those of us who served in the military know that it is far better, far more effective, far more reliable to achieve an outcome when it is part of a system, a network of men who are aligned on a similar vision, a similar outcome, who share a common framework. So here's the bottom line. If you want to reclaim truth, authority, and establish leadership in your home, you can't do it alone. For 10,000 years, men had brotherhood, a shared sense of community, shared beliefs and values, mutual mentorship and accountability. That's what made strong fathers. That's what built thriving families and communities. And that's exactly why Fit for Fatherhood exists. We are building that brotherhood again. Not in theory, but in practice. If you're serious about becoming the leader that your family needs, then go to mr-homemaker.com or use the link in the pinned comment below. At mrhomemaker.com, you can learn about the programs that Fit for Fatherhood offers, read the creed that every member must affirm, and if you see yourself in it, download your application today. Your family needs a leader. Your community needs strong men and strong families. It begins with you. Go to mr-homemaker.com and let's get started.